Good afternoon, good morning for you. My name is Enrico Sciubba, and first of all, let me thank the organizers for allowing me to participate to this symposium for Mike Moran, and then apologize for me not being able to attend in person, but due to some health problems, I cannot fly. That is, I cannot take a plane. I never could fly, but now I cannot take a plane for a while. So I asked to be allowed to make this oral presentation, and I think it will do. So thanks again. And first of all, I imagine that some of my family are there, and I really present my condolences to you, to Anna, to Marianne and Laura for the great loss. We still feel it, and I imagine they feel it much more than I do. Now, I will divide my short talk into 4 items. I will talk about Mike Moran, the thermodynamicist, the author, the teacher, and discuss very briefly his stance in the thermodynamic energy community, energy conversion community. Let me add first that I met Mike for the first time in 1983 in Niagara Falls. There was a ASME meeting, and I went there because his first book, Availability Analysis, just appeared in 1982, and I wanted to meet the author. At that time, I was a young assistant professor in Washington, D.C., and I happened to be the youngest guy in that group that met there. Rich Gajoli was there, I think Noam Leo was there, and other guys who are all by far my seniors, and they started calling me the young Sciubba. So the consequence is that now I'm 74, going for 75, and still people call me the young Sciubba. So it's a legacy of that first meeting. However, from that group, it evolved a very nice community in the second law analysis, which I will mention later. Let me talk first about Mike Moran, the thermodynamicist. His thesis was similarity analysis, doctoral thesis, similarity analysis of thermofluid science. His advisor was Edward Obert, a major author and teacher of thermodynamics, and his senior colleague in doctoral school was Richard Gajoli, another important thermodynamicist in our field. So the career, the interest of Mike for second law analysis was inevitable. At the beginning, he started studying, of course, on Obert and the Gibbs, Gajoli, and other American authors, and he apparently didn't know the Eastern European developments which took place during the Iron Curtain times, so they were not easily available in English. And actually, I think he got Bosniakovich, Fracher, Elsner, and Schmidt works, Chargut works, only after the 1980, when Ahern published a book which contained some of the translations of some of the works of these guys. These were the first guys to use exergy in process analysis. Very important works. After 2 years, he came out with this book, Availability Analysis, A Guide to Efficient Energy Use. It was an excellent attempt to propose second law analysis as a necessary tool in process engineering. This book was clearly influenced by Obert, and I suspect, I have a very strong suspicion that Rich Gajoli reviewed some of the drafts because they were very well connected and they corresponded very frequently. Remember that in 1982, that was a period in which this group I mentioned before, the second law analysts, had problems in publishing our papers because the main journals use reviewers which didn't like availability or exergy, and the reviews always were like, why don't you use first and second law together? What about exergy? We don't need it, and so on and so on. So we had problems. And the great effort of Mike and Rich to break this barrier was instrumental in developing the exergy literature. I think if you go any journal today, every year, I think the cumulative number of papers on exergy in peer-reviewed journal is above 2,000, which is a great number. And that was reached gradually after the 1985, when we broke this barrier. Mike had a sort of old attitude towards available energy, and it took him some years to accept the name exergy. But then he used exergy in his remaining books, and he didn't like extensions. So I'm not sure that he really liked thermoeconomics. For sure, he didn't like my theory, extended exergy analysis, because it includes too much stuff about monetary conversions and things like that. And his attitude was, if I study a process, if I optimize it using first and second law, exergy, I am sure that I have minimized the wastes, material and immaterial. So the efficiency of the process will be the highest possible or near the optimum. So the cost will adapt to this. This was his attitude, okay? Which is a very practical attitude, because it goes away from, it dispenses of all the optimization that gives you the fifth decimal of the efficiency you want to achieve, which in practice then cannot be achieved. So there is a range of optimal efficiency. So maybe the cost efficiency optimum is in that range with a less than 0.9 efficiency, but for all engineering purposes, it's good enough. That was Mike's attitude. And he insisted on that also in his later books. Which brings us to talk about Mike Moran, the author. 3 main books. Availability Analysis, 1982, already discussed. Fundamentals of Engineering Thermodynamics with Howard Shapiro, and later with Daisy Böttner. This was the most sold book, most popular book, stolen book from libraries, copied book, illegal copies, translations were made in India, as far as I know, and in China, for sure. Mike was very pissed about that. And it replaced the older book, on which I used when I was teaching, Sontags and Van Wylen. And it has a very distinct character than Sontags and Van Wylen. And much more modern, even in its first edition. Now I think it's come to the 20th edition, I don't know. Very student-oriented, very much, and more in the years, more student-oriented, but very rigorous, no shortcuts, no expressions like doing the mathematics, we derive this formula. Everything is derived. The teacher's manual is incredibly detailed. Was because I only had the first or second edition, then I didn't use the teacher's manual anymore. This book is used all over the world. So there are generations of students who are brought to thermodynamics by fundamentals of engineering thermodynamics. And this is very is an incredible achievement. Okay, so Mike shares with Howard and Daisy, of course, the merit, but he was the initiator of this. Then his third book was in 1996, Thermal Design and Optimization, written with Adrian Bejan and George Statsaronis. This book was dedicated to graduate students and professionals, and of course exergy practitioners, so thermodynamic, thermoeconomics practitioners. George wrote the thermoeconomic part. This is, again, the most used book in our community. If you look at the 100 papers which I keep reviewing in these months, 50% quote this book for some reference to some chapter. Immensely useful book. It's written in a very easy but very rigorous way, and it's concatenated with an example that starts, example of cogeneration plant, which starts from chapter 2 and goes up to chapter 9. So every chapter adds a little bit of additional treatment to the previous treatment. First mass balance, energy balance, then exergy analysis, then thermoeconomic analysis, and so on. Then some structural change to show that how do you improve the efficiency, and so on and so on. An exceptionally well written book. If I'm allowed some gossip, because I like gossiping, you will notice that the book authors are listed in this order: Bejan, Tsatsaronis, Moran. And when I asked Mike about why did you go away from the alphabetical order, he answered, Enrico, the names are listed in descending ego order. This was Mike, very humorous guy. And I have a lot of examples, which I cannot repeat all of them, about this very dry, quite Irish, I think, humor. He wrote very few papers because his work was most in the book. And he spent a lot of hours in this book. I remember in these books, I remember talking to him about it. He wrote a few papers, and I can again give you this a personal example. We wrote 2 or 3 papers together, I think, and he was a very, very demanding co-author. He picked up every single expression in my text. He changed it, he improved it, he discussed with me some possible changes, he proposed alternative formulations. And one of the things he always told me, write in English, guy, don't write in Italian, because when we Italians write, we have a different style. And he said that my English text was pompous, like an old-fashioned Italian text, while English is more concise, scientific English. So he really threw 90% of what I wrote out and substituted with his text. Perhaps this is the reason for which he had a few co-authors in other papers. Very rigorous, very rigorous. He prompted me continuously with objections, and we reasoned a lot in writing and in talking. And I learned a lot from him. I hope he learned something from me, but I'm not sure about that. Which brings us to his position in the energy community. As I mentioned before, after we met in 1983, this group started under the leadership of Rich Gaggioli to hold annual meetings, the first of which was in 1984 at another ASME winter meeting. It was called First Symposium on Second Law. And then there was a second symposium in 1985, third symposium in 1986, always at the Advanced Energy Systems meetings of the ASME. And then when I came back to Italy, I held the first meeting, which I called Fourth Symposium, in Rome, 1987. From there, it was a boom. ECOS will be held in Rhodos for its 40th edition. The conference has been held every year in Rhodos, in Greece. Will be held in Rhodos in 2024, in July. It was held in Las Palmas in 2023, and it was held in most countries like Brazil, Mexico, also in San Diego in the US, China 3 times, Japan, Poland, and another country which I forget. However, it was held all over the world. And that original group was still attending most of the meetings for many years, and we actually drove and shaped the membership and the direction, the scope of the conference. And Mike took part in many of the initial conferences, at least 20, and he also was the editor of the proceedings of most of them. And he also helped in organizing, scientifically organizing, the conferences. And we discussed a lot of items related to energy exergy analysis of process and thermodynamic processes. And he was always trying to bring his view of this engineering view, which was very constructive, very engineering-like. Okay? After all, ECOS is a community of engineers. I also recall that Mike was very demanding in seeping the new members and the new inclusions in the executive committee of this ECOS. And he insisted on discarding some people he called the lightweights, another Irish humor, indicating people who perhaps had a very high age index, but whose publications were devoid of any substance. Okay, much show, connections, but no real substance in their publications. Mike was very meritocratic in this. Merit was his password for getting into ECOS. He fought a lot about this thing, and I completely agreed with him, and still agree. His position in ECOS was so needed and so important that in 2023 in Las Palmas, last year, when I unfortunately had to deliver the memorial talk for his death, and I couldn't finish the talk because after 7-8 minutes my voice broke down and I couldn't finish. And maybe it's better that I'm not there today, but I'm doing this in my home at the computer, because perhaps something like that would happen this time as well. I get very emotional when I talk about Michael's departure. However, at ECOS 23, it was decided to launch a Michael J. Moran Award for the best paper written by a young researcher and presented at the conference. And in 2024 in Rhodes, we will probably institutionalize that. In other words, we will make a plan for the next conference to set aside a certain number of euros, to award this prize. And this is something that I think it's very much due, which doesn't bring us back Mike, but at least will make his name remembered even more by his students and future young researchers when they read his books. As I told before, as a thermodynamicist, he helped me a lot to improve my understanding and my style, and to be both more rigorous and more inspired, like mimicking the Einstein expression. My work is 99 sweat and 1% inspiration. I had maybe 2 good ideas in my whole 45 years career. That 1%, half of it belongs to Mike, because he pushed me to, to go on this 99% sweat, but to not be afraid of use my intuition and then put some of this 99 sweat to develop it. So I really owe that to him and to Rich Caccioli. But Mike, as I mentioned before, he also improved my style, my writing style immensely. So to conclude, I know I was allowed 10 minutes, this is 20. All of our colleagues in the thermodynamic community, in the worldwide thermal sciences community, will sincerely miss Mike. And we, our friends, like George and Adrian and Rich and I, most sincerely miss him, and we'll try to keep up his legacy. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for the pompous and not synthetic talk. I exceeded my time once again, and I thank you very much again for attending this. And my thoughts go to Mike. Good morning. Bye.